Welcome to another episode of the Creekcast Void. These have been very slow in the making. So don't expect them to release weekly. However, this week we got another one, slowly, bit by bit. This is a different way of doing it, but today I have to kind of give a brief introduction because this conversation just started off from the get go. Probably as interviewers, we didn't get to ask as much questions as we wanted. However, we will have him back on eventually. Basically today we have David McMillan on, a smuggler, a drug smuggler who worked for 40 years. Now he's no longer a drug smuggler. You're gonna hear some crazy stories. You're gonna be in for a ride. And yeah, he's basically the only Westerner to escape from Bangkok's one of Bangkok's maximum security prisons. And yeah, that's basically all the introduction I can give. As I mentioned, it'll be a bit loose, and it's kind of just going to be as if we were at a cafe talking, because we were just so invested that we kind of lost track of asking questions and whatnot. So yeah, enjoy.
I can see another face kicking around. It looks Mariano or something like that, I think. He's just he's left. Perhaps he's a disappeared person. Perhaps that was quick.
It was a quick.
Yeah, that's the quickest kidnapping that I've ever seen. I don't know whether we can raise much of a ransom, but getting back to that, wouldn't this be? I mean, I've had experience in Colombia and Pakistan, India, Afghanistan. I found that when people disappeared, the drug connection was sometimes there in case they were dead, but mostly it was a kidnapping where there'd be demands made for some money. So it's just a criminal organization, kind of, or gang even.
Yeah.
They didn't have to be very big or well organized. They just have to be nasty, and they grab the people. And what would sometimes happen, or often, if they didn't get the money they were expecting, they would sell them on. Look, we have this person, we haven't got time to mess around. But we'll sell them to you and take a reduced fee. And every time if you were kidnapped and you got sold on, it would get worse, because the people who would take you would be not any less impatient than the other one. Yeah. So they would be putting a lot of pressure on as well. So I don't know. I think the problem with the war on drugs, amongst many things, is that it's like any prohibition. It's created a living and an income for a bunch of people that otherwise would be selling stolen cigarettes or and because they're already deep in having both feet into a ruthless world, a bit of kidnapping doesn't bother them if there's nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
So it is. Oh, you're back again.
Yeah.
Can you
Sorry.
hear?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Oh, okay. Great to meet you. Sorry, it's just that my audio wasn't working, so I had to deck it up.
Oh,
it's okay.
That's fine. Oh, you're quite organized here. I see you're not in the same room by any means, and I don't know. You must be across town, are you?
Yeah, basically.
And if it's any big city that I know, it's simply if everybody went to meet each other face to face, then most of your time would be in the front or back seat of a car. So you might as well get some big limousine and convert it into a studio, because you're never really going to just pick up anybody who looks interesting on the street and do your interviews that way. So Rodrigo was telling me that you've been going about a year together on this.
Yeah, so far, yeah.
Where did the name
wow
come from?
I love that question, because the answer is never doesn't get easier to answer.
Good.
Basically, we were just high school students that were bored in the middle of class, so we started to do a kind of music group, I would
Aye.
say, and we were thinking of a name, and we thought of the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
So we were like, oh, we need a similar bug themed
Ah, good. Mm.
name, and we said the
I
crickets.
It's good, and I think anyway, somebody in the Spanish-speaking world had already chosen cockroaches, hadn't they? For
Yeah.
lots of things. So, why is it that cockroaches get such a bad name? I mean, never understood. What is it that they do? It's just the fact they survive anything, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
nuclear
it's that.
radiation.
You know, nobody really likes some bastard that just doesn't die. So a cockroach is going to be in for it. There used to be a cartoon years ago. I don't know whether you were a couple of generations before. It was the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers, and they were kind of some hippies that got involved. But one of them was Fat Freddy, and Fat Freddy had a cat. And one of the sidebars to Fat Freddy's cat stories was the King of the Cockroaches. And the King of the Cockroaches was very famous for his solution to any problem was to send out 10,000 more. And it didn't matter they got slaughtered. There's always, he might be related to dear President Putin. How much, how's that story, the Ukraine thing, going in Mexico? It's quite big here.
Yeah, it's like in the public, it's like really big, but there's a whole thing with our government being supportive of Russia. In some really weird ways, it's not going well, I would say, with the government, but the people are pretty like it's present on their mind. A little bit less now, since like a few months have passed, and the
That's right.
public perception isn't that well at retaining.
Oh no, it's
information.
terrible. In fact, I think they've done very well to sort of stay up in the public consciousness that way. But really, you kind of get the feeling that the news organizations are really hoping for something,
Yeah.
that has some more changes in it, especially now, because it does appear that this will drag on for months, if not years. And that gets hard to make it into such a publicly affecting story.
Breaking news story.
If I tuned into the main channels in Mexico City and the main evening news, what would be the kind of things I'd be hearing this week?
Oof. I think the main thing, it depends on the channels, but there's a lot of channels that are always constantly just talking about political debates on what the president said, what the president is going to do.
That's
very superficial.
It is. It's an absolute dead end because you're listening to a bunch of professional liars. So my grandson asked me, what do politicians do? I said, their only function is to get elected. That's it. And once they're elected, they want to stab everybody in the back in their own group to get to the top. Yeah. And once they're there, they just need to stay there. But what about, hospitals and schools? No. That's a different group.
They're like cockroaches, actually.
Yeah, they are. They are.
I mean, there's actually a really interesting book called The Guide into Becoming a Dictator, which really compares the differences between an elected leader and a dictatorship. And it's not that different. Like all politicians just need their keys to power to stay there. It just so happens that sometimes the key to getting power is also sometimes helping a demographic.
There's no way out of it. You've got to please somebody sometimes. And of course, it always seemed to me that the obviously dictatorial people, even Stalin or Saddam Hussein, I'd be looking at the screen thinking, but wait a minute, just do what we do. You have two parties, two main groups, and then you change from time to time. I mean, you don't want to be king all the time. It's tiring. So you let the other side win, but it's really the same club.
Yeah.
And, when the new guy comes in, you say, well, all right, look, that's the drawer where we keep the money. This is where everything gets burnt and shredded and the secrets are kept. And you can have my black book of girlfriends because, it's time for me to change on that one. It really, and this illusion of choice that people have goes on, on and on and on. And yet I don't know why I suppose in another more cynical sense that the TV channels, it's very cheap programming, isn't it? Just to have a bunch of talking heads come in and tell a lot of nonsense and hope people out there, I mean, especially given the problems of Mexico. And I mean, Mexico City it must be, how many people live there now? Over 20 million, is it?
I'm not sure. Let me look that up.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I think it would be. But just this, to run that kind of municipality and to get the rubbish collected and, keep the electricity on and the water, that would be enough of a challenge. And I suppose really those things that are what actually concern people in their daily lives.
The day-to-day.
I mean, water's not doing good though. Like the position of Mexico, like we don't have like an actual way of getting water, so it kind of be like exported from sides of the country. Like the city itself, it's running out of water.
Well, there's no big dams full or lakes that have got lots of water they can pump out or anything. No.
Not in the city.
Oh, right. And anyway, isn't it correct that Mexico City is actually below sea level? It's quite low down. So on the one hand, if there was any water, that's where it would come. But there's never enough to, fill. And the groundwater must be pumped out a long time ago, wouldn't it? I mean, dries it.
When the conquest happened, they basically, Mexico City used to be a lake, like it was a massive lake, and it was all built over it by the Spanish. So now all that water has been just layered over with buildings and cement,
and probably pumped out by now anyway. Yeah. So you're saying that in time to come, the whole of the city might somehow crumble in under this empty cavern where the water once was. Oh.
It's actually sinking.
Yeah,
like
it's actually sinking.
The city is sinking. Yeah.
It's a lot of people say there's going to be water wars in the future.
Definitely.
Imagine that. There sort of are anyway, because from time to time you hear, even in countries that don't, they don't report much trouble, there'll be two small towns in China really fighting it out over the water supply, and this is a place where the people don't get any choice in anything. So, they must be pretty desperate to start fighting over that. And everything else is very expensive. Desalinization plants are very expensive, and you end up with a lot of salty water you can't use for anything. But what was I going to say? Mariano, Rodrigo is going to the United States next year. I think it is next year, or September maybe. And what's your plan for the future?
Well, I'm actually learning German right now because I have a plan to go to Germany to study, just university in general, study biochem.
Okay, well, that's a good field.
And I mean, the general plan is to get outside of Mexico, like however means possible. But I'm actually taking, I'm taking a year off.
Right.
And I'm taking like a leap year just to collect myself, work, be entirely sure of what I want to study and be entirely sure of where I want to study. But the plan is, as far as right now, Germany.
Well, good luck in getting to be entirely sure of anything in just 1 year. But I suppose, what made you decide on Germany? Why, out of all European countries, or even the US, why there?
Well, first, some connections.
Okay.
It's a pretty cool place. I love the architecture, the community, and just I don't know how the universities, especially, they are mostly free. Like you
Yeah.
pay no tuitions, it's just you
And German
go, you
people are
pay.
very
Yeah,
nice too, aren't they? They're great
yeah,
people. I mean, the joke years and years ago was that they were over-organized. You know, the idea, English people thought that German tourists have a guide who tells them where to, and then at 10 o'clock, the guide would come out and say, okay, for the next 1 hour, we will be enjoying ourselves, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, I always remember this sort of um, German reserve was told to me as a joke by a friend who talked about a couple that had a child, an only child, and but after 1 year, 2 years, the little boy never spoke. They took him to a doctor, nothing wrong with him. 3 years passed, 4, 5 even, not a word, not a sign. Didn't cry, didn't laugh, didn't anything. But he was clearly getting better at things. You know, he could seem to be even reading. So, and then one morning, he came down to breakfast, and they poured hot milk on his cornflakes. Oh, and he made a face, and he turned to them and said, I have to tell you, I do not like hot milk on my cornflakes. And they were astonished. You know, but you can talk. We thought there was something wrong with you. 5 years. Why didn't you ever speak before? The little boy turned to the parents and said, well, up until now, everything was satisfactory. I thought, yeah, that would be a German kid, wouldn't it? So now, Rodrigo was telling me that he'd come across me with a Lead Bible interview, which was dealing with the escape from the Bangkok prison, which was quite a few years ago now, from 1996, and was kind of essential because I wasn't going to be executed in 2 weeks, but I was going to be sentenced to death. And it really concentrates your mind if you're facing a death penalty. So things worked very well, and luckily for me on the night, because I really didn't know where I was. It was so big, it's huge. I looked it up the other day. You know, now there's 22,000 people in that jail.
Wow.
It's like and it always was like a city inside itself. The guards never lived very far away or around the edge. I mean, they used to sleep there at night when they're on duty, which was good for me. But one of them was stirring during the night. But he went back to bed after going and getting a drink or something. But you know, the one thing I never accounted for properly, this was a very elaborately planned thing. You know, I mean, I had 20 other schemes. They didn't work because they involved other people.
Yeah.
And that all falls to pieces. In fact, if somebody had been with me that night, I would have been finished, because you stop and argue things with, you know, somebody with. But if I'd have known how huge the place was, I think it would have been, there was no Google Earth, so it would have been very off-putting. But I kind of had an idea where the outside wall was. And I had friends, and most of the people in there, they'd burnt every bridge in their life. They had no friends left. The family they'd lost or betrayed in some way. And it was really the bottom of the end. But I had friends enough, for example, that a guy said that I gave him my photograph, and I needed a false passport to get out, and he arranged that. He told me that he had, and hid it in a place, an apartment. He gave me the key. Now, people will in life often promise you various things, but if once I did get out, and once I got closer to that apartment, I started to think about it. Well, wait a minute. He would have had to somehow. He was Chinese. He had some good Chinatown connections. You'd have to get a passport, and it couldn't be more than about kind of freshly stolen, no more than about a month, because there had to be an entry visa on the computer for having come into the country for this person, and then so he would have needed people who had people at the airport to type that in, and the photo I'd given him needed an adjustment, and it was kind of elaborate. It was before Photoshop, so this meant taking a picture of a picture and fiddling around, and so many little details about it that had to be done. Stamps put in it with the right dates. I thought to myself, would anybody actually go through with this? And yet, I went to the apartment and I felt behind the mirror, and sure enough, there it was. I had a look at it. It wasn't quite as good as I'd hoped. And in fact, the hour I had on between the flight from Bangkok to Singapore, which, because one of my ATM cards didn't work, that was as far as I could get. But that gave me an hour to stare at this passport and find things wrong with it. And there were kind of a lot, it looked to me like the plastic was wrinkled in a couple of spots, it wasn't great.
Yeah.
And if I didn't like it very much, on landing, the Singapore customs immigration man at his desk, he didn't like it very much either, I must say. He gave me a funny look. And I saw him take it and slide his hand towards the ultraviolet light. And I knew from experience that in the British passports, there would have to be, when it went under that light, 3 pink little crowns would have to show up along the edges. And I thought, I started praying to, Confucius and all the Chinese gods. And he slid it under, and I was rewarded by not only my own life, because Singapore would have sent me back, but these perfect little 3 crowns in pink that were along the edge there. That's true. I mean, you guys have got to ask yourself, young as you are, if some unthinkable thing happened to you and you ended up in some shithole somewhere around the world, is there somebody you could call, apart from each other, of course, to the kind of person you can call at 3 o'clock in the morning and start to go into a long explanation, and the words that you hear interrupting you are, Rodrigo, don't explain any further. Just tell me where I have to be and what I have to bring. And that's all you really want, so that made a very big difference, having friends. Yeah. Of course, you'd think I wouldn't have, having used up all my luck then, that I wouldn't push it further. But one thing or another happened. And I ended up in trouble in Pakistan. Worse trouble. In Thailand, they just wanted to execute me by machine gun.
Okay.
In Pakistan, it was the death penalty, but I remember saying to some kid after I was arrested at an airport, not with anything, that only makes it worse. But I said, what's it like with the police here? Oh, they torture. I don't know, this isn't good. Well, what if you give them some money? And he thought hard about that. Oh, then just little torture. I thought, this is going to be a tough negotiation, this one. And they took me down to some dungeon, and when I went in, there was a big 24-volt truck battery sitting there with click, click, alligator, crickets waiting. And that's not a good thing. You don't want to see that at any time in your life. That sounds strange. I did come across there was two Pakistanis, but there were originally three of these guys, and they were telling me a story, a true story, about how they were saved by the Gulf War. They were in Saudi Arabia, had been caught with some heroin, I think, and were facing execution. And it's quite quick there. I think the average time between arrest and execution is about 120 days. So not long.
Yeah.
At least you don't have to sit up nights worrying about it. And they were 4 days away from having their heads chopped off when the Gulf War broke out. And you might remember in Gulf War I, it was, or was it II? I think it might have been I. Iraq went into Kuwait. And so the United Nations all came in and with the United States and kicked them out of Kuwait and chased them back to town. And Saudi Arabia, of course, was another monarchist, kingly sort of place. So they liked the idea that the West would come and protect them. They never thought that was going to happen. So in gratitude, they released all the foreigners. So these guys... this guy said to me, yes, it was God and Saddam Hussein and George Bush who saved me my life. Now, hearing that story, you think, well, that's a bit of luck. You don't suppose... And where was I hearing this story? These same guys were up on another drug charge, again facing the death penalty. So, you know, how they say these heavy sentences stop people from doing things. Well, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. I suppose because mostly smugglers are gamblers.
Yeah.
I guess everybody, if you know, when you travel and you go to an airport, I don't know. Have either of you been to Asia in your travels?
No, never.
Nope.
Okay, you say that like I don't want to go there. But a lot of people who heard of my escape back in those days said to me later on, well, you know, it's strange. Anytime I've gone through Bangkok airport, I've sometimes looked around and thought to myself, I wonder if there's anybody here today crazy enough to be smuggling drugs. And what would it be like for me? Would I do such a thing for money? And I suppose it's just that people would like to know how it would be that they handle extreme situations like that. Whether they get out of it. And also sometimes people... Now, the best couriers were... And I was really not as ruthless as I suppose it would have made sense to be. I wasn't like... I'd really worry about these people, not just because of the loss, but I knew if they made any decision, it would be the wrong one. And clever couriers were people you didn't want because I have an idea. Yeah. Well, why did you go down there and get arrested? Well, it shouldn't have happened, but I thought it would be better if I did such and such. Now, they're terrible couriers. They're always good. The ones who are great are people who are either, well, of course, they're gamblers by nature, but also fantasists. They can very easily live in a make-believe world. And one of the best ones, you know, I watched him in the old Brussels airport. You could look over the railing and see people arrive. And he came with, I mean, I hadn't told him anything what to do, but he arrived and he was dressed in a kind of professional sports outfit, and he had a tennis racket, an expensive one. Yeah. I wouldn't know. He had my American Express card, and he didn't hesitate to buy the things necessary for the job. And I asked him what he was thinking, and he said, well, I imagine that I was an international, you know, Roger Federer type tennis player, and it came through. He was so confident that the customs officers looking on, they'd look right past him. They'd look at him and say, no, he's part of the real world. I'm looking for somebody hiding, somebody shrinking themselves, not wanting to be seen. So there was a type of person who was very good at it and very rarely would have trouble. But I did always say, look, I'm not going to tell you what it is that you're smuggling.
Yeah.
But let's just imagine that's the worst thing you can imagine. Plutonium, maybe, or powdered babies. Not that you can get those anymore. And so that was good. I didn't want them thinking about all of that. I think one of the guys got back and said to me, gee, how much was I carrying? This must have been worth quite a bit of money. Well, that was the last job he ever had for me. I mean, as soon as he said that, I knew what that meant. And other people were really not suited to it. I had a school friend, and we were quite close. It was like you two guys, but he looked on at a distance at my life. He didn't want to get too close, but he did come to me and say, look, I need some money. I've got a thing I want to do. Everybody does. Well, how much would I get for? What would I be smuggling? I said, Peter, it's better if you don't even think about that. I'll be taking care of your safety. You always have the choice. If you get trouble, don't mention my name, and I'll give you a cover story, and Joe, the taxi driver, or whatever. And I'll do my best to bribe you out, and if that fails, I'll escape you out. You'll get out. But he wasn't really. He was just now the rates I was paying were very high, because these people are gamblers, right? They're going to blow their money. I wanted them to have enough so that it'd take them at least 6 months to blow all their money. But they're very good at that sort of thing. They know how to spend it. And they know how to make sure they'll have nothing left. But this school friend of mine, even though he was hearing something which would have been the equivalent today of, say, $200,000, he said to me, David, but I'm not a criminal. No, Peter. Well, you will be after this, but no. No, but I mean, I'm not a bad person. I'm a normal person. I've just decided to do this. Now, that's a weird thing, isn't it? I said, Peter, let me get this right. I should pay you a bit more or a lot more because you're a pure person. You're a virgin. Somehow that's a better thing for me. I don't know how. Totally inexperienced. And that's right. Oh, and you're doing something that you don't approve of. So you're willing to do this for somebody like me, obviously a scumbag with no morals. So I should be impressed with your saintliness. Statue I'll build in your honor, and pay premium for your soul. Is that how you calculated this out? And he sort of understood, but not quite. He couldn't quite work it out. But I had to point out that for, I don't know, less than 5%, a 20th of what I was paying, there were people that would kill their own mothers for that I knew. It's not, it's certainly not hard to find. But do you think he, from what I've described of him, do either of you think he would have made a good career or not good career?
No. I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
No. And I think we know why, because somebody like that, I mean, the people who lived in fantasy, they just walked on through. They didn't. A guy like that is not going to be happy enough just walking through. He will want to confront the customs people in some way. maybe not consciously, but some part of him will want to get in front of their face just to kind of say, I'm doing this. I'm Saint Peter, and I'm walking through with something, you're trying to stop. People with high morals, you don't want them, but not for the reasons you think. It's simply that those with high morals want everybody to know they've got high morals. It became so. I learned a lot in a fairly short space of time about, and it was, it was a bunch of hippies as we started out. We didn't even really. We used to import Thai weed in they used to call Buddha sticks in those days, and it wasn't a really great quality compared to the stuff now. But we were kind of hesitant about putting even 10% on top of it, because the idea was that drugs should be legal and you open it up, but it doesn't. You find fairly quickly that you have to get, if you're not organized, it's dangerous for people. So you have to be very thoughtful about what you're doing. And that was really the thing that drew me in. I was kind of arrogant little prick at 20. And if somebody said no, I'd have to think, no, well, wait a minute, let's not get hasty here. You say no, but I can think of a way, yes.
Yeah.
And that was the enjoyable part. I always felt a bit depressed after a job was over. And I never really wanted to give the stuff away. I remember having some cocaine that I got before they ran out of the good chemicals a few years ago. It was nice, beautiful, shiny, white, like pearls. And I looked at it before handing it on. It was like getting rid of a child. I'd taken so much care to this thing and made it a little bed so it could travel, and done all of this, and had to apologize to it. I said, look, it's time for us to leave now. I must say, you're not going to be treated well. You'll be squashed, and bad things will be mixed with you. Kind of things you don't want to be next to, and people will act stupidly when they have you in any way. It's not going to. It's almost like I felt like interviewing somebody before they could buy it.
Yeah.
And if I didn't approve of what they had in mind, then I don't know.
So it was kind of like an addiction.
Oh, doing the jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very, and because after I started to make some money, I could make them even more complicated.
Yeah.
And the thing was that whoever was carrying, you had to make, when that person arrived, as though they came from somewhere else. And that involved lots of, they didn't have a very, look, when you travel now, it's really destroyed, smuggling by air. Anybody with any sense uses the ships because they can do what they want. But there are exceptions, but they're pretty rare. I mean, the Colombians are very inventive at finding ways to mix it in. They lots of times, I'd been in the business like 20 years, and some guys from Peru sent me something, and I knew it was there, but I couldn't find it. It was a box of little leather change pouches, like you put coins in it and something. Yeah. So I thought, all right, yeah, straightforward. It's in the lining, that's no big deal. That's not very good. That's dangerous. So I cut one open, nothing. It had a steel button clip, like on the top of a pair of Levi's. But I looked at that, and that was sort of solid, and you couldn't get much. So I said to my girl at the time, look, I'm not going to give up because I know it's there, and I don't want somebody to tell me. But I finally, absolutely, piece by piece, took them apart, and it was under the little press button thing, but they'd taken so much trouble. There was, I don't know what would have been in a gram and a half, something, maybe 2 tops, 3. But the way they made it, though it was metal, when you peeled it up, it looked like thin metal, but it was concealing a thicker metal underneath. I mean, they'd taken a lot of trouble with that. So, but the real trick with the couriers is to, apart from choosing the right person, is to manufacture their journey so it looks like from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's because, not many people are, there's a lot of passengers and not many checkers. Now, they go on what the computer tells them about that person or where they've come from. But if you can mix them into a transit lounge and then they go from there, either on a different passport or identity, and swap through, then unless something very unusual and they appear, I don't know, if you landed in Mexico City and you'd come from Washington, D.C., there'd be very little reason for the Mexican authorities to decide to look at what you've got.
Yeah.
It would be smuggling. Smuggling what? There's not, I don't know. I mean, in the black market, is there anything that's smuggled from west down to the south? I don't think there is there?
I don't know.
Maybe.
I think I do know. I think it's mostly guns and drugs as
right.
everything. But yeah, mostly guns.
Yeah, maybe a bit of. I mean, years ago, some of the drugs that were hard to make properly. I mean, like ecstasy is very MDMA is quite a big bit of chemistry to do that properly. Because the market seems to take anything, so it's really not. I think a lot of ecstasy now is mostly speed with other things in there, so it's kind of rubbish. It's not much pride in the underworld over the chemist, but But anyway, I think it'd be unusual if somebody got stopped doing that journey. So that would be the way to.
And I mean, you were talking about your friend a bit of back, and with kind of that perception of criminals in the wider sense of how it's something bad. I think I think both of us can say that you see that as the established kind of train of thought: criminal good, cop good. I mean, criminal bad and cop good. In your experience, do you feel that that's misportrayed? It's not the way it really is.
Well, certainly, I've been asked, and this will lead to your question. Some people have said, but when you decided to retire, did they let you? I thought, oh, they? But you work with whoever you like to work with. Nobody can make you work with somebody you don't want to.
Yeah. You're
not going to do a very good job with well, you might do a good job with a gun at your head, but that gun has to be you've got to feel it in your head before, not let loose running around. Of course, something where you have to use a lot of care and thought and operational planning is something that can't be done under force. But there's a very easy way to look. Firstly, all of the people I've ever met were just like anybody else.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, in a different set of circumstances, it's possible that either of you guys could have ended up very close to the underworld or involved in something. Like if you had a father who was involved in it. Now, that father would just be... People, though, sometimes become a cartoon character. Hollywood will write good guys and villains in a very straightforward way. And even when they mix over, like the good cop has to do something bad to and they like to have the good cop do something bad because it makes good drama. But all of the things in there are really for dramatic purposes.
Yeah.
So I mean, Hollywood must have been so happy that drugs were outlawed, because it opened up a lot of possibilities for making good television and movies. I spoke to a dress designer or clothing costumer on Miami Vice, and she said, no, it's good. Well, we're a bit stuck with the lead characters. We have to dress them in a certain way, and you'll notice in any TV show, for some reason, they're always wearing the same clothes. Well, I mean, literally exactly the same clothes, week after week. So Sonny and Tubbs, or whatever their names were, in Miami Vice, were always wearing, he was wearing T-shirts and whatnot. But she said, no, but the bad guys, we have a fun job there. We can kind of dress them as wild as possible.
Yeah.
But not many, the most successful crooks I ever met always dressed down, not
overdressed.
People who are too flashy or excessive. They're walking out with a target on their backs. They're not going to last too long. A guy that, when I was in my teenage years, that really taught me how to survive. He was so quiet about things. He went out to work every day. He didn't do any work, but he did his thing. But he got dressed for it in his working man's overalls, and Rocky, his name was, and I'd know when he'd just had a big shipment in, because I'd come across somebody. Have you seen Rocky around? I haven't seen. Oh yeah, I saw him just this week. The guy must be going bad. Why's that? Well, I was at a gas station and he asked me for $20 to fill up a tank, and he was embarrassed about it, but he was a bit short, and he said he'd pay. You know what I thought to myself? Rocky, you bastard, you've just got to load in. You're caked. You've got money up to your neck. That's why you've gone to all the trouble of telling people around town and acting embarrassed about it. That was a nice touch. And borrowing money. Nobody will suspect this. So, so I'd ring him up, and I knew it was him because there'd be no answer on the other end of the phone. He just would. I mean, some people talk cautiously, careful what they say, or use coded words, but that's very dangerous. I mean, it's very easy to get a policeman into court saying, well, I know that is that the word paint is code for cocaine. It always has been. They talk like that. So he just said nothing. And this would be, say you're going up to Rocky and he's just had a load in. And can you go up to him and say, hey, listen, Rock, I'll take a few kilos of that, let's come in. I could use that. Nah, it doesn't work like that. Rocky would say, Dave, you couldn't lend me a few hundred. Rocky, spare me. I'm not believing it. No, save it. I need some of that. Oh, no, mate. Look, I've been out of it. I'm so hot. Police are watching me all the time. Are they? But you met me today, even so. Well, we go way back. So what about it? No. Look, honestly, I haven't got anything. But I know some people. Oh, yes, you do. You know some people. Yeah, where are they? Oh, you have to go there. You have to go here. You have to wear a funny hat. You have to climb mountains. And then what happens when I get there? Well, I tell you, you don't want to do that, Dave, because, why? Because it's so damn expensive. I laughed, said Rocky, when I heard that. No, it's too much, but it's very good. Very, very good. But it's too expensive, so I won't even bother. I won't waste you. I won't insult you by arranging that. So you'd have to go through this, dramatic comedy for an hour, as he denied and said it wasn't his, it was people he knew, and it was so, it cost him much money. It was very good stuff. I'm told it's very fucking good, but expensive. And but this was professionalism about it,
Yeah.
So, mate, speaking of that, the that great courier I had that dressed like a tennis pro, and he was a record producer the next time after that. That's why he had to rent a Maserati from my Amex card. I switched to Visa after that because it's not unlimited. He everything fell to pieces when I was under investigation by a long-running task force, and they spent a lot of money, and I was still pretty young, about 23. And I asked my lawyer. He said, "Get out of town. How big is it?" I said, "It's big." How do you know? Because these police wouldn't even work in the police office. They got special officers where they went. He said, "Look, they spent a lot of money. They're not going to just let that go. They will arrest you and they'll make a case, even if there isn't one." So let them try. I thought. Anyway, like an idiot. And they did all of that. And it was a terrible arrest because there were no drugs found. So the case gets a real fight. My whole family was arrested. They had to let my mother go in there. This was just to put pressure on me. My wife was arrested. Business partner's wife was arrested. And they ended up being killed in prison. They put an informer in with the girls in their dormitory, in their rooms. And this informer, unfortunately, was an arsonist and set fire to the place, so they died. Wow. So it was bleak for there. But getting back to my point, because it was good for the police because they were able to frighten the couriers by saying things like, "Well, they don't care about you. They had their own wives killed." So a lot of those couriers ended up in the court case taking indemnities against any prosecution. They couldn't be touched for giving evidence. They didn't see anything. But here I'll get to the point about what goes through the mind of people. Here I had that courier, Peter, who was very good at assuming a new identity. But in a crazy way, it worked in my favor in court because after 6 months with the police, he wasn't himself any longer. He was a Miami Vice character again. He was sunny. He had a little walk, a bit of a John Wayne going on there, and his manner in court was so strange. It was kind of like, we that is Joe and Freddie. He's talking about policemen here, as though they're old friends or something. These drug guys are very slick. They hide everything they do. They have their product, and they do their thing. But we can get right on them. And my lawyer had to say, "Wait, you were a courier?" "Oh yeah, then." But yeah, sure I was. But that got me inside. That got me right inside. And the jury they couldn't quite take this in. And another one who was a real criminal, slick, underhanded rat, he'd got us more or less arrested by a Thai businessman who was coming over to see him, giving him stuff. And the police steamed in and caught him with a bit. And he said, "Look, there's no deal you can make that will get you out of this." He was another Peter. Watch the Pedros. He said, "Look, I can give you McMillan Sullivan." That's our last name. So he went to my business partner, Michael, and said, "Look, I've got a guy who brings it in, sells it for a quarter of the price. You can buy him from me and take him. But don't tell anybody, especially David." Now, silly Michael, taking people at face value. Look, somebody comes to you, some guy who's been a bit of a diver and a ducker, and he comes to you and says, "Look, I've got this guy. He comes from Argentina, but he's very good at his job, but I don't want him anymore. I'm going to have a different sort of life. If you give me 100,000, you can have him. I'll make the introduction. He can come to you." Yeah. Now, what would you think about that? even if you were in that business, how would you take that? Think, oh, hey, thank
Seems
you.
seems a bit sketchy.
Well, yeah. I mean, later on, after we all got arrested, I said, all right, Michael, I know who it was now. No, it was Peter, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. He brought this guy. Yeah. Okay. Now, Michael, tell me if I'm wrong here, but didn't you think there was something slightly mad about a guy coming to you and saying, look, this guy comes every month and he brings me something that makes me a load of money. But I don't want it anymore. I don't like money. Money, oh, it's a terrible thing. You can have him. Oh, yeah. And you can have him at good rates. I'm asking only 100 grand, which is like not enough. You know, he should have pushed it a bit more to make. And don't tell David. Yeah. Why? Because David won't like it anymore. And sure enough, this guy was red hot. Even after the first meeting, there were police all over him. So there was kind of no way out. We managed to get something from him, but only after doing a lot of slippery moves with hiding cars and changing radio frequencies and all of that. But he got himself immunity from prosecution, the one who sold him to us. And the jury were a bit funny about him too, because his lawyer had said, when you go into court, Pete, you clean the books. What? Yeah, everything you've ever done, admit to it, because they can never prosecute you, because that's part of the deal, anything you say in that courtroom. So even if it's got nothing to do with the case. So he stood there for an hour and a half, admitting to every possible crime known to man. And the jury even stopped it and asked the judge, what, this man, is he serving a long sentence or something? No, he's, well, there's an arrangement, whereas he testifies and he's, what? You can go free. Oh, they said. And they kind of tore it up. I mean, this jury went, they became creatures of their own. The trial ran 6 months, 119 witnesses, 6,000 pages of transcript. They had a whole lot of tapes where they bugged the houses, but they couldn't use those. Not because of the law, it's because when we found them, we used to sit around the table at night reading from scripts. You know. Rodrigo, yes, I tell you what, I'm glad I've got nothing to do with that business anymore. What business? Oh, you know the one. Right, yeah. It was a dirty business. I'm glad I really never got too close to it. You know, people. The police later on said to me, that was a load of shit, that wasn't it? So they couldn't use that. But this jury kind of got to know us. And I spoke for 3 days on the stand, and the judge didn't like, me making speeches and whatnot. But I had to, a long trial, they don't hear from you. So you've got to use that opportunity to let them feel, look, this is a human being that you might meet anywhere that you're about to send away. So they were, they used to lead the jury in before the judge arrived. So we'd tell them jokes. And we used to sing a cappella songs. I don't know whether you remember the Nylons. They used to be an a cappella band. And one of their hits was, I'm Not That Kind of Guy. So we'd tap along in the courtroom and get a bit of rhythm going and, sing to them. Judge found about it and they stopped it, of course. But they went out and came back the next day and said, sorry, we can't agree. Look, said the judge, you go out there and you try a bit harder. This a lot of people got into a lot of trouble for this trial. It's and it cost a lot of money. So they went out and they just didn't come back. The only time they came back was some money had come from my office, about 100 grand, and they wanted to see that for some reason. The judge didn't really like the idea of the jury getting that in their hands. Yeah. The police had brought in some drugs as an example of what drugs look like. I don't know why and they wanted that too. I was trying to join together drinking straws just to get enough over onto that exhibit table there. You know. So days passed. The judge said, yeah, you getting anywhere, jury? Well, yeah, sort of getting there. They came back in. We thought they'd made a decision after 6 days, but it wasn't. They were just saying, look, we don't want to work tomorrow, but you can't go home. You're deliberate. Yeah, no. We want a picnic. So they had to organize a bus, and it was a Sunday, and they went into the countryside, and they all had Chinese food or something like that. So it wasn't a surprise that I was found not guilty of almost all of those. But there was one that was a bit close. So they compromised, and that was enough to get me 15 years. So it took a bit of getting out of. But it's a kind of life where a lot was very much was destroyed in those in that early time. I was 23 when this 15 years came. I was there for about 11, I think. And I had a little bit more for a helicopter escape, but that was. And the only way of surviving, having everything sucked away from you. My wife was dead, everything, and this is not important. Everything I owned was taken. The police had lived in my house for 3 weeks and burnt the paintings in the fireplace for fuel and shit in the swimming pool, and I never even saw my clothes again. And I was in a Supermax where even the clothes you wore had special clips that you couldn't undo them without permission, and they'd lock it on the top if you had a visit. And it was so. The only thing I was allowed to have from my lawyer was cassette player of some of the tapes from the house, and I could play my life for 6 months back on these tapes. So not only was it all gone, but I had this strange ghost of the past that was coming out of this little crappy cassette machine. So after a decade of that, the line was absolutely drawn. They were my enemy. That was without question. And my only job was to survive. They didn't leave me alone, of course. They came back. They were rented an apartment. They were there. So I decided to go back to work, and then I had about only 3 days of real freedom. I got another passport very carefully, and a second one on top of that, and ended up in Thailand. And just for those 3 days, I could smell freedom, had a sense of it. I was kind of floating on air. But the USDA had found a way of intercepting some phone calls up north, and an old business associate there, he stupidly told a friend of his where I was staying, and I found myself arrested in that. Then, as you know, I got out of that when things went badly there, and then I ended up in Pakistan, and I was tortured in Karachi, which is, you always ask yourself stupid questions like, I wonder if I could survive that, or how would I cope with that? Don't ask yourself that kind of question. Fate will give you the answer. And then getting out of Pakistan was different. I mean, all the court cases in Pakistan and India are conducted in English because it's one of the 10 official languages there, passed on from the old days of the British. So they kept that for the courts. And then it was really only where I just didn't have the energy for it anymore. And the Berlin Wall had come down. Nothing was. We had kind of ideas about how the world was going to transform, and it never did. And don't you think it's astonishing now how everything that looked well, at my age, everything that looked like it was heading somewhere better fell back. You had kind of Trump politics. I mean, the guy was a clown, but it didn't really matter. And in the United States, Roe versus Wade, the abortion law is being challenged quite seriously. It might be overturned. And there's some drug law reform, but there's also a backlash the other way. And it's because it doesn't win you any votes, changing drug law. Nobody ever got elected because they said they were going to change the drug laws. Oh, and there's no money in it. I mean, if you have to beat the black market, that means you can't tax recreational drugs in the same way. Not immediately, you can sneak up on it, but in the beginning, you've got to undercut booze and cigarettes. And they won't be happy about that. They'll say, why have they got why was the cocaine or heroin industry got to cut rates compared to what we pay in taxes? They didn't have a point. So those things won't change, and attitudes won't either. Look, if I've always said this, if peanuts were made against the law, everybody would laugh at it. That's stupid. Why did that happen? I don't know. Somebody choked on one. Oh, no. Anyway, but you would find after 20 years of this law being in place, it would be enforced. Policemen being what they are, it's an opportunity for corruption. It's you can imagine a father in 20 years of, nut wars and macadamia kingpins, pistachio, all of that. Some father talking to his kid, his teenage son, saying, "Oh, look, I understand, son, but and lots of people say there's nothing wrong with having a few peanuts, but you look at those peanut dealers driving around in their fancy cars with their gold and guns and everything. It wouldn't take much for it to be utterly accepted in the world, and it doesn't. So you get to kind of an age when you don't want to be part of that fight.
Yeah.
But I suppose for every one of the readers of the books or viewers who wish me dead, or that I should have been executed, and there's quite a few of those. Hi guys, love your work. If I had been dead, then of course I wouldn't be able to tell of some quite interesting and useful things that have a result.
Yeah. So now that you look back, after being through all those different experiences and, really meeting a lot of people and kind of, your whole life was survival to a certain extent. Do you have any regrets on it?
It's a hard trade-off to make. I always thought that I would have been happiest being a technician or working in the sciences, because that's discovery of something that's unknown, how it works, is always really interesting. And nature holds so many fascinating secrets.
Yeah.
Everything from the way proteins fold, and you look at so much of nature is just the shape of things, and what makes a shape anyway? Where does a grain of sand finish and the air take over? And okay, you've got to be a little bit better at maths for this, but I think I would have had a happier life anyway. But on the other hand, there's some things that I've come to know that I just don't think I would have learnt in any other way. And I've become became years ago. People always think in the contraband business that everybody's ruthless, but the fact is, if you've been cheated, the odds are you were expecting that. You knew that person was likely to cheat you. So if you walked in there, you deserve what you get. And oddly enough, I think it does somebody good every so often to be cleaned out by some cheat, because so it wakes you up to think, well, wait a minute, I shouldn't stumble around like an idiot here, or and and people have asked me, well, didn't you take vengeance on those that were in a position to do so? Of course not, because it was my fault. I blame myself for my wife's death all along, always have. I can point the finger at various people who behaved badly or did the wrong thing, but she wouldn't have been in that position if it wasn't for me at all, anyway. So, and also even people who, I came across a guy while I was in the Thai prison. He was conning me. I knew it. He was from Boston, and he was promising he knew Thailand so well. He did speak Thai very well. He could get me out on bail. He could do this, and money was going over to him and all of that.
Yeah.
So I got out my own way. I gave myself a full pardon, and when I caught up with him, he was a bit hesitant. I said, "Look, Dean, you've got nothing to worry about. In fact, I thank you in a way, because I was at a very low ebb at that time. I wanted to kill myself, but it's not really possible to do that in a Thai jail. It's under the privacy. It's nothing to jump off. And even my early thoughts of escape were just to get out over the wall and go to a tall building and throw myself off that one. I just didn't see, if I couldn't win, even if I'd taken the best precautions, what would be the point? But it was he, in a way. He gave me false hope, and he was conning me, but it was the thing I needed, in a way, just at that time. So I don't think I would have ever known that or lived enough to have taken that attitude if I hadn't been through some of these things. I remember being in one of the Karachi prisons, and some guy's being beaten down there because his family's got money and they want to get it. The five of us in this cell, we had nothing. Some of us, they used to handcuff you in uncomfortable positions to just give you a hard time. And our real job for the day was to find a match for the one cigarette that we had left. And the hunt for that match went on for all day. Anybody who was passing, one guy even got himself beat up just trying to get a match. The guard got annoyed with him, dragged him out of the cell, battered the hell out of him, and I get back in there and shut up. Oh, yeah, all right, boss. You haven't got a light, have you? My head off to that kid, This is somebody who go the extra mile for any reason. There's so many things that, and the comedy of the underworld, when I say the comedy, the ridiculousness of it sometimes. I came down to a beach in near Kota Bharu in Malaysia. There was blood all over the place. There were 5 smugglers dead. There were 2 cops taken off to hospital. It was carnage. A shipment was coming in. Now, all of that shooting and that death and the clash between these 2 sides, do you know what that was over? What they were smuggling? You couldn't guess. It was garlic. Yeah, the Malaysian government had decided to protect local garlic farmers by putting a 400% duty and surcharge on top of any imports. So overnight, it became a highly profitable thing to bring in garlic from Thailand. And they couldn't stop them, so they got serious and they started shooting them. And it was a perfect demonstration of how, what not to do. That it doesn't make any difference. Yet, we human beings just repeat mistakes time and time again.
Yeah.
Even and a lot of things are code for, we're not going to do anything, but we'll pretend, like sanctions against Russia. The only effect of that is to put a lot of people out of work, but also it's been a great advantage to the Russians so far. They've had to put capital controls in so money doesn't leave the country. Local businesses have been just starting to make a lot of things that were previously imported. they don't lose foreign exchange because the money doesn't go out to pay for foreign goods. So all in all, it's certainly having no effect on.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? Who's going to overturn, ruthless leaders by saying, "Oh, I can't get a McDonald's anymore. So, you're out. Get out of the Kremlin, you bastard." Well, why? When you get to a certain age and you see the same lies told and told and told again, it's very hard to take anything seriously.
Yeah.
That stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, listen, I've got to ask, where, because time's running out in a way a bit. In 20 years, when you're pushing up against the wall of 40, say, how do you imagine the world to be? Exactly the same, different good, different bad?
Man,
You want to start off?
yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because I have two mentalities when it comes to the future. Like the world that I hope it will be, and the one I kind of know it would be. And I mean, with the whole climate change destroying the planet and the world becoming.
But slowly, we got plenty of time.
It's not that slow now.
Oh, I know, but probably worse things.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about climate change is that it won't kill humanity off, like no matter what. Like civilization is way too strong to fall off that.
Yeah.
It's just, it would be so uncomfortable and just not a great place to live in.
Okay.
I mean, I just hope it's better than it is today. I mean, you can't go that bad anymore.
No.
I mean, let's hope this is the last big pandemic we live through.
Well, Bill Gates doesn't seem to think it'll be the last one, but certainly we're better prepared for what comes along.
Let's hope for that at the very least. But personally, like, I just see myself still learning, trying to travel across the world, because, I mean, life is pretty short. I know, like, I'm like way too young to be saying that.
No, but you're correct. You're not wrong about it. It's nature's cruel and only gives us until about, I don't know, 50 years old, and it's starting to go downhill. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like just a year ago, like we started this podcast, and it feels like we did it like last week. We're graduating high school. That's a big milestone. So I've been told. And yeah, I mean, just a lot of stuff, a lot of variables are mixed in with how the future will be shaped. But I just hope that like we can help for it to become a better world than it is right now.
Okay, and Rodrigo, how do you see it in 20 years' time?
I think the world in 20 years, through this podcast, it's also helped me shape that vision a bit, because you talk to a lot of people who are like working and trying to improve things for communities and stuff, and also different perspectives, so it opens up your lens a bit. And I think it's kind of made me realize that there's so many people trying to change things for the good. However, it's not really, it doesn't really fall on the 99 percentile of people, the future and what it holds. It really just falls on the 1% with all the money and power to make these decisions. So honestly, I don't feel that the next 20 years are going to be very optimistic in that sense.
Do you imagine a world where when human lifespans are extended?
Let's hope.
I mean, I suppose we can live to about 130 without, just by ordinary means of stopping disease. But it's the way science is. Sooner or later, And we'll know because if it happens sooner, Elon Musk will live forever, I suppose. He'd do what, I mean, those guys are spending a lot of money on some pretty crazy ideas for extending lifespan.
Yeah.
But I suppose, what will we do for entertainment if you if you lived for 500 years? How would you entertain yourself?
Oh, me.
My God.
That's a question I surely can answer because that's basically what I want to work with.
Mhm.
It's like this almost sci-fi field of science, like just genetic engineering in general,
Yeah.
on where you can modify the genes of a human being to become a better version physiologically that they would ever be. And I don't know, like ever since I started to play with the idea of, oh, it would be so cool to live forever. I don't know, like every time I mention that, I get a lot of pushback of, oh, what would you do if you live 1,000 years? It's like there's so much to humanity. Like there's so much to learn, so much to travel, so much to explore that you couldn't in a million lifetimes. So it's just like this step forward. I think it's just that humanity has come to be very comfortable with the thought of death, since
Yeah.
it's a universal constant for every living being. It's just a thing that happens. If you live, you will eventually die. There's no two ways about it. But if we change that, if we change that perception of life, I would think we'll become a better human race overall.
I would imagine talking to somebody who looked like in his 30s, but was in fact 400 years old and had been alive for that long. That person would be worth listening to, I would think.
Yeah.
A very relaxed person, because if he hadn't abandoned hope, he would have found a way to live. I suspect that what people will do for entertainment is play the game of a kind of immersive virtual reality and live other lives, created lives, just by the neurons being stimulated in a systematic way to give the illusion of being in the days of the Roman Empire or the Middle Ages or 1930s Chicago, wherever it is. But I think when people live for a long, long time, so many of, don't you think that that'd be an improvement, that the ridiculous things that cause people problems will be dismissed by people who live for hundreds of years? Well, I'd hope so. Yeah,
I mean, it would really change the perspective of a human life. Like 40 years, like right now, at the very least to me, that seems like a lot. That's like almost half a lifetime of a human being. But if we start to live even more, 40 years, that time I took just a weekend off. Just that perception of time will so greatly change to suit our new lifetimes that I don't know. I think it would be an opportunity for human beings to start to be more useful with their time. Ironically, right? Since we have
all the
so
time
little
in the world.
time. Yeah, because I think right now humans have so little time, and we spend most of the time doing things we don't want to do.
Exactly.
Like people just need to work to get money, to be less unhappy, to have the things they want. Just like most of that time would be
And we
used
complicate things to make them more time consuming as though we're enjoying it. Like instead of making a cup of coffee by keeping one going 24 hours and pouring a cup. No, coffee is quite a complicated thing. What's happened to the beans, how they've been crushed. It's got to be in a certain kind of cup, warmed, of course, not just straight out of the thing. And then make elaborate Japanese tea ceremonies out of ordinary things to make the moments more special than they are. But I would think all right, then this really swings on to that other point. If it's if it's kind of likely that people will get more out of their own lives, but also be able to live in simulations that are entertaining. And perhaps if you're going to live forever, you could even make it almost like your whole life. Well, it seems like a whole lifetime is that simulation. And yet we know that the universe is so huge, unimaginably huge, and the odds of finding Earth-like planets are not so rare, that there are other intelligent civilizations out there. And if they're living simulations, then, well, statistically, we're more likely to be living one now. Or that is, we are part of Rodrigo's simulation. You say, we've been written into the program for his amusement. You can take it as a selfish way. Well, it's good. That sounds kind of a relatively optimistic way of looking at the future, I think. And I'll tell you what we should do. Here we are in May of 2022, survived the pandemic and going on. Wherever you are, send me an email in a year's time, and we'll see what panned out.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, let's set a specific date.
All right. Well, it's 17th of May today, so let's make it the 17th of May in 12 months' time, and we'll see. And we'll be back on the air. I won't look any more collapsed and at death's door than I am now. So, you guys will be going ahead, and like some old vampire, I can, just from what you tell me, I can get dripped on and survive with the stories of hope of the future. All right, it's been fun the last hour and a half. So, all of the Creekcast fans out there, good to hear from you, and we'll be back here in a year. And what I'm going to do is this, I think, called WeTransfer. I'll send you this entire recording so you can do what you like with it.
Oh, thanks.
And,
thank you so much.
Whatever use you may wish to. And I must go now because I can hear my little pet dogs destroying each other. It's probably feeding on the carcass of my friends out. Okay, guys, all the best, and let's look to living a long time, shall we?
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
Okay,
It's a pleasure. Wonderful time.
I'll just try and click my way out. I'm stuck.